Hey, Cub fans. Thanks for joining us here today on Cubs 24/7 channel, where Randy talks Cubs with delight and optimism. We're going to talk today about one of the most important, if not the most important, trades that the Cubs ever made. In fact, our 2016 World Series title doesn't happen if this trade doesn't happen. And I believe that. I also believe there are a lot of other things that obviously contributed to us in 2016. But after I walk you through this, I think you'll probably agree. It's like, yeah, we probably aren't who we are if this trade in the summer of 2013 doesn't happen. So, extremely significant trade, and I don't think it gets talked about near enough. As significant as it is, and what it did for us, and how it catapulted us toward 2015, 2016, and even in 2017. So we're going to talk about that trade. Here, the parties are. The first one is Jake Arrieta. We all know what Jake did. I'm going to walk you through some of the specifics. But Jake Arrieta came to us from Baltimore in that 2013 trade, along with Pedro Strop. So Pedro Strop and Jake Arrieta were with the Orioles beginning the season in 2013. And because at that time we were rebuilding, and we were ready to kind of sell some of what we had, and the Orioles were in it, and they wanted to make a run. So it was sort of time and place. Orioles were looking for some help, some veteran help, and we were looking to go ahead and let some of that go. So the two players from the Cubs that ended up going to Baltimore for Arrieta and Pedro Strop were pitcher Scott Feldman. And as soon as I tell you that name, just ask yourself, do you know who Scott Feldman is? And I'll bet most of you say, no, I don't remember him, or I barely remember him. And the other player was Steve Clevenger, just a 7-year total guy, catcher, backup catcher. He didn't play much. So we sent Scott Feldman and Steve Clevenger to Baltimore for Jake Arrieta and Pedro Strop in the summer of 2013. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how that went. But the first thing I want to do is thank a guy named Rick Adair. Rick Adair was a 7-year minor league pitcher who became the Baltimore Orioles pitching coach. And he was the pitching coach there when Jake Arrieta was there. And Rick Adair destroyed Jake Arrieta. He destroyed him physically. He destroyed him mentally. And that's not me saying it. That's what Jake tells. Jake just comes right out and says that's what happened. He just could not mesh with his pitching coach. And the problem, and I guess Rick Adair, according to Jake Arrieta, did this to a lot of players. So we'll just thank, Rick Adair for making Jake Arrieta lose his mind and perform the way he did so that we could get him. And that's the other thing. Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer at the time liked Jake Arrieta, and they knew that Rick Adair had messed with him completely. So it's like, this guy is really destroyed because of the approach the pitching coach is making, but we know what Jake can do. Basically, what you do is you let Jake be Jake, and Jake's going to be Jake. But for some reason, Rick Adair could not put up with Jake's unorthodox cross-body delivery. He just couldn't deal with it. So he tried to change Jake, and it broke him down. Jake just couldn't do it. Jake's delivery is what made him special. Jake's delivery is what got him to the big leagues. And as soon as he gets there, Rick Adair, pitching coach of the Baltimore Orioles, tries to change him. Messes Jake up. Let's talk a little bit about Jake just to kind of refresh our minds. Jake was drafted by the Orioles 5th round in 2007 out of TCU. And he played for Baltimore from when Jake started playing the minor leagues, he had success, right? Jake had, in his last year in the minor leagues in 2009, Jake had a 1.85 ERA. Jake was fine. And that 1.85 gets him called to the show, and next thing you know, Rick Adair doesn't like it, starts changing them. And so Jake's total numbers in his 3+ years at Baltimore, he went 20-25 with a 5.46 ERA and a 1.472 WHIP. That sounds bad. Let me give you his 2012 numbers. In 2012, with the Orioles, Jake goes 3-9 with a 6.2 ERA. He was flopping around. He was floundering. The Baltimore media didn't think he was going to make it. He's like, he can't. He's never. Where is he going to find himself? The other thing happens. Orioles are kind of in the hunt in 2013. They're looking for more steady help in the rotation, and they just didn't trust that Jake could provide it. So at that same time, Cubs had this pitcher named Scott Feldman. Scott Feldman, decent pitcher. Scott played in the big leagues for 13 years, had an overall record of 78 and 84 with a 4.81 ERA, and 342 games, 1,086 innings with a 1.35 career WHIP. Decent pitcher, 13-year career. He's all right. In that half a year, though, with the Cubs in the first half of 2013. Scott Feldman went 7-6 with a 3.46 ERA with a 1.143 WHIP. See? So the Orioles are going, okay, Scott Feldman, veteran, 30 years old at the time, has experience, steady, pretty predictable, having a good year, right? So you look at Jake's numbers and you go, well, Scott Feldman looks like maybe the safer route. You're going to get a steady presence. So that Jake Arrieta to Feldman for Feldman trade at that time in 2013 looks like it kind of makes sense. But thankful, Jed Hoyer, and Theo Epstein gives Jed the credit on this one. Jed saw what Jake was going through and knew what Jake could do and was sort of laying in the weeds. He wanted Jake Arrieta. Similar situation with Pedro Strop. Jed wanted Pedro big time. He thought he could get Pedro thrown in just as a throw-in deal. Pedro hadn't become Pedro yet. The Pedro we know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, hadn't shown up yet. So Pedro was a little unsettled, unsure. So, but again, Jed knew that there was more in Pedro, and he wanted Pedro, but because of the situation, he thought he could get Pedro thrown in. Well, he wasn't quite ready to get it thrown in, so he had to do a throw-in, and his throw-in was Steve Clevenger. Now, Steve's a good guy. Steve played 7 years, had a 7-year major league career, but he was just a backup catcher, a light-hitting backup catcher. In 2013, the year they traded him, he'd played in only 8 games. He only had one hit in 2013. He had one hit, hitting a .125, guys, with a 347 OPS. And Jed gets him to just take Clevenger as the throw-in for Strop. So those are the guys you got. Thank you, Rick Adair, number one. Thanks for Jed to kind of see that. And, at the time, all the Orioles reporters, they were in on it. Like, yeah, can't trust Jake. Don't know if he's ever going to come out of it or not. Well, I guess he came out of it, didn't he? So here's what happens. First of all, before we go into Jake and Pedro, Steve Clevenger was out of baseball after the 2016 season, and Scott Feldman was out after the 2017 season. So they played a little bit, but just didn't do much. Meanwhile, Jake and Pedro turned it on. And what happened to Jake when he got to the Cubs is Chris Bosio, pitching coach at the time for the Cubs. And Bosio just decided, I'm just not going to make the mistake that Rick Adair made and try to change Jake Arrieta. Just let him pitch. Sometimes leave it alone, right? Let Jake be Jake, man. And that's what he did. So Jake shows up, and in the 2013 season, and pitched for the Cubs from 2013 and a half, halfway through, to 2017. Had a couple of no-hitters, went 73 and 42, had a 3.14 ERA in 148 games with a 1.1 WHIP. In 2015, I'm going to say something here in a second. I'll have to think about it. Maybe I'll say it, maybe I won't. I don't know. In 2015, after the All-Star break, second half, Jake went 15 starts, had a .75 ERA in those 15 starts. He gave up only 55 hits in 107 innings and went 12-1. .75 ERA. I'm going to say it now. I'll do it. It's Gibson-esque, that second half of 2015. Gibson, yeah, I said it. I'm going to own it, too, for a while. We'll see. I've never said that before. It's the first time I've ever said Gibson-esque. It's my new word. Probably the last time I'll use it, too. 2015, Jake won the Cy Young. Had an overall ERA of 1.77 for the season. A sub-1 whip at .865. My God, 22-6. Jake Arrieta. In 2016, the World Series year, he went 18-8 with a 3.10 ERA in 31 games and a 1.084 whip. Jake. How'd Jake do in the playoffs? Well, Jake played in the 2015, 16, and 17 playoff run. So he played in a total of 8 series. 3 series in 15, 3 in 16, and 2 in 17. In Jake's Cubs postseason career, he went 5-3 with a 3.08 ERA and a 1.08 whip. World Series of 2016, Jake went 2-0 with a 2.38 and a .971 whip. Do we do that without Jake Arrieta? How we built up and ramped up in 13, 14, 15, and then 16? I don't think we do that without Jake Arrieta. I don't know. Which means we don't do that without that trade. That trade doesn't happen. All right, what about Stropey? What's Stropey do? Well, we had Strop from the trade day in 2013 through the 2019 season. Yeah, I kind of want to do my lid a little like that while I talk about Stropey. I think I will. This is very unlike me. I feel very uncomfortable with my hat turned this way, but I'm doing it for Strop. Stropey pitched for us from 2013 to 2019, 413 games, 2.88 ERA with a 1.053 whip. Strop's postseason record for us, 1.86 ERA in 22 games, sub-1 whip, .828. In the World Series of 2016, Stropey pitched in 3 games, went 2 innings, gave up nothing. Jake and Strop, are you kidding me? That's enough of that. Get back to normal here. I'm all excited about this Jake and Strop trade. This is phenomenal. And as I'm talking about it, I want you to ask yourself, wow, first of all, did you know? Did you put 2 and 2 together? Why aren't we talking about it? That's a trade that just transformed us with Jake and Pedro Strop. And I just thought it was more than high time we talk about it. So I did. There it is. This Jake Arrieta guy, man. Boy, was he something else in 15, 16, 17? Whew. Those no-hitters, unreal. And, of course, Stropey became a really – Strop was fun to watch. You know, he was entertaining. So, you know, that's been a while. Sometimes we miss how fun that was, but that was a really good run, and Jake Arrieta was part of it. So I'm going to tip my hat to Jed Hoyer on that one. He led the way on that. He saw it and made it happen and put us in this position. So there's the story of the Jake Arrieta, Pedro Strop deal with the Orioles for Scott Feldman and Steve Clevenger. Hope you enjoyed it. I think that's it. Till next time, Cubbies. See you soon, and go Cubs go.